There are secrets that cannot be buried. They are lived out in broad daylight. They walk around the town square, they go to Mass on Sundays, and an entire town learns to ignore them, to look the other way, to feign collective insanity. In San Ignacio, Tamaulipas, the secret had two heads, two bodies, and a single name on everyone's lips, a whisper that was both mockery and terror. The married twins. I am Mateo del Valle, and this is Forbidden Reality. Today's story is not about a crime committed in the dark of night. It is about a horror cultivated for 30 years under the relentless sun of the Northeast. The story of the Garcia twins, of a mother who played God, and of an entire town that became her silent accomplice. Before we dive into this abyss, I ask you to subscribe, to share this video, not so that you will listen to me, but so that the silence of San Ignacio will be broken forever, so that the memory of what happened there is not blown away by the wind of oblivion. Let's begin. Sofia arrived in San Ignacio on a day in May. The heat was like a beast that jumped on you as soon as you got off the bus. She was young, a social worker who had just graduated from the capital. She arrived with a manual under her arm and her head full of theories about community development. She had been sent to implement a support program for vulnerable families. She didn't know she was entering the heart of a vulnerability that didn't appear in any manual. The town was small, dusty, adobe and concrete houses with peeling paint, a church, a dry plaza, and a store. The people were quiet, reserved. They looked at her with an ancient distrust. In her first week, Sofia tried to conduct a census. She went from house to house. She asked questions, and she was met with walls of silence, short answers, shifty glances. It was at the Garcia house where the silence became thicker, heavier. It was the largest house in town, 2 stories high, with a wrought iron balcony. The matriarch, Doña Elena Garcia, a widow for decades, greeted her at the door. She was a tall, bony woman with piercing black eyes, a queen in her castle of dust. Behind her, in the dim light of the hallway, Sofia saw 2 figures, a man and a woman, young, around 30 years old, identical, the same pale face, the same large, empty eyes, the same straight black hair. They were the twins, Mateo and Luna. "Do you need anything, miss?" asked Doña Elena, her voice sharp as glass. "I'm the new social worker," said Sofia, trying to smile. "I'm registering the families in the village." "We don't need anything," said the old woman. "My family is complete and healthy." Mateo and Luna didn't say a word. They just stared at her, with the same expression, an empty curiosity like 2 porcelain dolls. They didn't look at each other, but they moved in unison. When Doña Elena took a step back, they took a step back. When she closed the door, the 2 silhouettes vanished together into the darkness. Sofia stood in the street, under the brutal sun. She felt a chill. Something in that house was deeply broken. In the days that followed, she asked about the Garcias. People reacted strangely. Some shrugged. "They're weird," they said. Others lowered their voices. "Leave them alone, miss. Don't get involved." The shopkeeper, an elderly woman named Consuelo, was the only one who gave her a clue. "They call them the Casaditos," she whispered as she wrapped some tortillas. "The Casaditos?" asked Sofia. "Yes, because they never separate, never. They've slept in the same room since they were born. They eat from the same plate. Some people say they even feel the same pain. If he has a headache, she does too." Consuelo looked toward the door, nervous. People talk, but no one here sees anything. It's better that way. Doña Elena is powerful. Sophia's curiosity turned to alarm. She began to observe the twins. She sometimes saw them at the market, always with their mother. They walked a step behind her, identical in their silence. They didn't talk to anyone. They just looked at their hands. One afternoon, she saw them alone for the first time. They were sitting on a bench in the square. They weren't talking. They were just sitting there, very close together. Luna was knitting. The yarn got tangled. Without saying a word, Mateo took the yarn and, with infinite patience, began to untangle it. Their hands moved together, as if a single mind controlled them. A child running by tripped and almost fell on top of them. Mateo and Luna stood up at the same time, with the exact same movement, like a reflection in a mirror. Sophia felt a mixture of fascination and horror. That connection wasn't normal. It was absorbing, total. She knew she had to find out what was going on inside that house. She had to break that silence, even if the whole town was screaming at her not to. Sophia looked for an excuse. The vaccination program. It was the perfect excuse to enter people's homes. When she arrived at the Garcia's house, Doña Elena tried to slam the door in her face. "My children don't need government poisons," she said. "It's the law, ma'am," Sophia insisted, with a firmness she didn't feel. "If you don't vaccinate them, I'll have to report you." Doña Elena glared at her. But finally, she let her in. The house was dark inside. It smelled of old wax and wilted flowers. The furniture was covered with white sheets, as if life had stopped years ago. The twins were sitting on the sofa in the living room, together. Sophia prepared the syringes. Her heart was beating fast. "You first, Miss Luna," she said. Luna looked at her, then at her brother. Mateo nodded slightly. Only then did Luna extend her arm. When the needle entered her skin, Luna closed her eyes. But it was Mateo who shuddered. He let out a small cry of pain. Sophia froze. The syringe trembled in her hand. She had seen it. It wasn't a village tale. It was real. "Now you, young Mateo." Mateo held out his arm. He didn't make a sound when she vaccinated him. But Sophia saw how Luna, beside her, bit her lip until she drew blood. She finished her work in a deathly silence. As she put her things away, she accidentally dropped a box of gauze on the floor. The gauze scattered under an old cabinet. "Oh, how clumsy of me," she said. "Excuse me." She bent down, pretending to pick them up. But her goal was different. She wanted to see what was under the cabinet. She saw something. The edge of a book, a photo album. With a quick movement, he took it out and hid it in his briefcase. He said goodbye and left the house. His hands were shaking. His mouth was dry. The air outside felt fresh and clean, as if he had just come out of a tomb. He ran to the small room he rented. He locked the door and opened the album. The air left his lungs. The first photos were normal. 2 beautiful babies. 2 children playing. But as they grew older, the photos became stranger. The twins were always together, hugging each other, dressed alike. The father was no longer there, and in the margins of the photos, there were notes, in Doña Elena's tight handwriting. "My angels, one being in 2 bodies, the perfect union. The world doesn't deserve them. They only have each other. Forever." The last photo made her vomit. It was a recent photo, taken in the living room of the house. Mateo and Luna, now adults. They were sitting on the sofa. He was putting a ring on her finger. A gold ring? Simple. Underneath the photo, her mother's handwriting. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. My sacred wedding. February 14th. Sophia hugged herself, trembling on the floor of her room. It wasn't a strange connection. It wasn't codependency. It was an abomination. A forced marriage between siblings, orchestrated by their own mother. A mystical delusion turned into incest. The word casaditos was no longer a village nickname. It was the literal description of a horror that everyone knew about, and that everyone kept quiet about. The story of Doña Elena's madness began with a loss. Her husband, Rodrigo, died young. A car accident on the road to Reynosa. He left her alone with 2 5-year-old children. Doña Elena, who had always been a devout and strict woman, broke down. But her pain did not turn into sadness. It turned into a fierce fear. Fear of the outside world that had taken her husband away from her. Fear that something would happen to her children. Her only possession, she began to overprotect them. Then she isolated them. They stopped going to school. I will be their teacher. They stopped having friends. The other children are impure. She clung to an idea that began as a comfort and ended as a deranged theology. Her children were not 2. They were 1. 2 halves of a perfect soul that God had sent her. They were superior, special. And their destiny was to remain together, forever. They grew up in that bubble. Their only world was their home. Their only law was their mother. Their only company was each other. Doña Elena fostered their dependence until it became absolute. She dressed them alike. She made them eat from the same plate. If she punished one, the other received the same punishment. She erased the boundaries between them. She taught them that the love they felt for each other was the only true love, the only pure love. The rest of the world was sin and filth. When they reached puberty, Doña Elena's madness took the next step. The spiritual union had to be complete. Total. She convinced them that their destiny was to marry, not before men who were corrupt, but before God, before her. The ceremony took place in the living room of the house. Doña Elena officiated. She declared them husband and wife. 2 bodies, 1 soul, forever. The twins, their will completely broken, accepted. They knew no other reality. They couldn't imagine a life apart. Incest wasn't taboo. It was the fulfillment of their purpose on earth. The town, of course, noticed. Rumors spread like a virus. But no one did anything. Doña Elena was rich. Her husband had left her land. She provided jobs. She lent money. No one wanted her as an enemy. And then there was fear. A superstitious fear of that strange family, of that house that seemed to have its own law of gravity. So the town chose silence, a voluntary blindness, a conspiracy of whispers and sidelong glances. For 20 years, until Sophia arrived, an outsider who didn't understand the rules of silence. A naive young woman who believed that the truth mattered. Sophia, with the photo album in a bag and her heart in her mouth, went to see the town councilor, a fat, sweaty man named Ramiro, who was a distant cousin of Doña Elena. He received her in his small office, which smelled of coffee and dust. She showed him the photos. She explained what she had seen, what she had deduced. The representative looked at the photos without flinching, as if he were looking at a First Communion album. When Sophia finished speaking, Ramiro leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. Miss, he said with exasperating calm, I appreciate your concern. I really do. But you're from out of town. You don't understand our customs. He paused to light a cigar. Smoke filled the small office. The Garcia family has always been special. Doña Elena is very religious, in her own way. What you see is something bad. She sees as something sacred. And the boys, well, they're happy that way. They don't bother anyone. They don't hurt anyone. Sophia felt a wave of heat rise up her neck. It's a crime. It's incest. They're being manipulated, she said, her voice louder than she intended. The deputy exhaled slowly. Those are strong words, miss. Crime. Incest. Here we call it a family arrangement. And as long as the family doesn't complain, there's nothing we can do. I advise you, for your own good, to focus on your vaccination programs and leave the Garcias alone. He nodded toward the door. The hearing was over. Sophia left the room. Helplessness left a metallic taste in her mouth. The smoke from the delegate's cigarette had clung to her clothes and hair. She felt dirty, complicit. But she wasn't going to give up. She drove the 4 hours to Ciudad Victoria. She went to the State Human Rights Commission. It was a modern building with air conditioning and friendly staff. A young lawyer listened to her attentively. She nodded. She took notes. She told her that the case was extremely worrying and atypical. She promised to forward the file as a matter of urgency to the special prosecutor's office. Sophia felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps here, far from Doña Elena's influence, someone would do something. 2 weeks later, she received a call. It was from the prosecutor's office. They summoned her to their offices. She was received by a commander from the investigative police, a man with a mustache and ostrich-skin boots. He did not invite her into an office. He spoke to her in the hallway. Standing up. Miss Sophia, he said, looking at some papers in a briefcase. We received the human rights report about the Garcia family in San Ignacio. Yes, said Sophia, hopeful. We've already sent an agent to investigate, discreetly. And what did they find? The commander sighed, a sigh of annoyance. We found a town where no one wants to talk. A mother who says you're harassing her. And 2 adults who, according to my agent's report, appear to be of sound mind, and who stated that they have no complaints against their mother. He paused, as if to let Sophia absorb the blow. Look, miss, without a complaint from the victims, there's no case. We can't just walk into a house and take 2 30-year-olds away by force just because you don't like how they live. But they're being manipulated. They don't know any other life. It's psychological abuse, pleaded Sophia. When Carmen returned to the office with the evidence, a superior told her, staring blankly at a monitor, Ms. Mendoza, this is now a missing persons case. That's another department's job. Fill out Form 2B prime. The commander put away his papers. The click of the briefcase sounded final. Psychological abuse is very difficult to prove. And frankly, we have kidnappings, femicides, more urgent things. Your case is closed, due to lack of evidence. If you get new evidence, a recording, a letter, anything, bring it in. In the meantime, I recommend that you stay away from that family. For your own safety. The system wasn't looking for justice. It was looking to organize the horror into files. Classify it. Label it. Lack of evidence. File it away until it was forgotten. The commander turned his back on her and left, his boots echoing in the polished hallway. Sophia stood there, alone. The cold air conditioning chilled her to the bone. The long, empty hallway looked like an endless tunnel. She realized that the system was not a wall of silence, like the one in the village. It was worse. It was a maze of procedures designed to keep everyone from getting anywhere. A monster made of paper and stamps that fed on people's hope. She left the building. The sunlight blinded her. She sat down on the curb and, for the first time since she had arrived in Tamaulipas, she cried. She cried for the twins. She cried for herself, for her naivety, for believing that justice was blind, when in reality, it was complicit. Sophia returned to San Ignacio defeated. She thought about giving up, about running away. But every time she saw the Garcia house, the anger returned. She couldn't leave them like that. She did the only thing left to do. She contacted a journalist from a national media outlet known for its investigative reporting. She sent him the photos from the album. She told him the story, with all the details, including the indifference of the authorities. The report came out on a Sunday morning. The headline was explosive. The Lovebirds of San Ignacio, the family that turned incest into a religion with the complicity of a town. The country was shaken. The scandal was huge. Social media was ablaze. The phones in the governor's office didn't stop ringing. Suddenly, the case that had been closed due to lack of evidence became a national priority. At dawn on Monday, San Ignacio was invaded. Dozens of patrol cars from the National Guard, the Attorney General's office, the DIF, and Human Rights. Television cameras, reporters. The town, which had been a sanctuary of silence, became a media circus. The raid on the Garcia home was violent. They broke down the door. Doña Elena greeted them with the Bible in one hand and a curse in the other. She was arrested while screaming that they were demons from hell. They found the twins in their room. They were hugging each other on the bed. They were shaking. But they weren't crying. They just stared at the armed men with empty eyes. When they tried to separate them, they reacted for the first time. They screamed, an inhuman scream, the scream of a single animal having a part of its body torn off. They had to sedate them to be able to take them away. They were taken out on stretchers, covered with sheets, as if they were corpses. And in a way, they were. The townspeople, interviewed by reporters, feigned ignorance. No, I didn't know anything. They looked strange, but you don't get involved. Poor Doña Elena, such a good woman. The conspiracy of silence became a conspiracy of lies. Justice, when it comes late and for the wrong reasons, looks a lot like revenge. Doña Elena died in prison, awaiting trial. A heart attack. She refused to eat for weeks. The end of the twins was the real tragedy. They were admitted to a psychiatric hospital. They were put in separate rooms. To break the pathological bond, said the experts. It didn't work. Separated, they ceased to exist. Mateo stopped talking. He would lie motionless for hours, staring at the wall. Luna refused to eat. She screamed at night, calling for her brother. They wasted away, like two plants that have grown intertwined and, when separated, dry up. They died 6 months apart. The medical report said multiple organ failure. The truth is that they died of absence. They died because the only half of their soul they knew was torn away from them. Sophia quit her job. She left Tamaulipas. The system had broken her as much as it had broken the twins. Now she lives in the South. She works in a library. surrounded by books, by silence. But it's a different kind of silence. It's a silence that hides no horror. Sometimes, on the news, she sees the face of the commander who attended to her in the hallway, receiving an award for his fight against human trafficking. And she tastes the metallic taste of bile in her mouth. The Garcia family home in San Ignacio is abandoned. No one dares to buy it. The windows are broken. The paint is peeling. It is a monument to a secret that everyone knew, and to a truth that came too late. I'm Mateo Del Valle, and I'll see you in the next Realidad Prohibida.